Hi everybody, welcome back to NoPro Worship. My name is David Wesley. Before I start, I just want to say thank you to everyone that's had my family in their prayers the last couple of weeks and for leaving kind and thoughtful comments on the last video that I made about us losing our baby to miscarriage. It really has meant a lot. Our family is starting to heal and it's partly because of you, so thank you very much. This week's video is the fifth and final in a series on playing guitar in various keys. We've looked at the key of G, E, D, C, and this week we'll be looking at the key of A. It's really important to remember that every key on the guitar comes with different strengths and weaknesses, and the better that you know them, the more effectively you can use a guitar on a worship team. So no, we didn't save the best key for last. A is not known as the most popular of keys to play in, especially amongst amateur guitar players. And there's a couple reasons for that. The first one is that two of the primary chords in the key of A are bar chords. So they're difficult to play for new players and they're difficult to get a good sound out of, and some of the transitions between chords can be more difficult as a result. And the second reason why A isn't terribly popular to play in is that it's so close to the key of G. Rather than learning new chord shapes and these bar chords, you can just slap on a capo onto the second fret and play in the chord shape of G, and ta-da, all of a sudden you're playing in A without any of the headaches. And people go for years doing this. And I think that's a shame because the key of A actually has some really great characteristics, and there's some tricks that you can pull out, especially the ones that we use for the key of E, creating a wide open sound using some of those close cousin chords. It's really worth giving it a shot. So we'll walk through the primary chords in the key of A because it's the last video in this series. Every chord in this key has already been looked at in the context of different keys, but we're going to look at how they function in the key of A and what makes it special in this key. As always, we start with the number 1 chord, and in the key of A, it's A. It's a nice strong chord. It uses 5 out of the 6 strings, so it's pretty decent to have as your number 1 chord, your home chord, to really set the tone for the key that you're playing in. And there's a couple of different ways that you can play it. I tend to, for the most part, use my 2nd, 3rd, and 4th finger to fret these strings. You can also use 1, 2, and 3, and you can also take your index finger and fret it across all 3 strings if you have some flexibility in the knuckle there. One benefit of using it this way is that you only have to use 2 fingers then to switch between the A and the A sus. When you go from A to A sus using 1, 2, and 3, you also only have to put down 1 finger to transition. When you're using 2, 3, and 4, going to the A suspended is a little bit tricky. You have to kind of slide your pinky finger out, and it's really difficult to do that smoothly. So you choose the fingering based on what chords you're going to or coming from. Another variation of the A chord that's really worth mentioning in this video is the A2, also known as the A add 9. There's only 2 fingers involved, so it's a little simpler to get to, make some of the transitions a little smoother. And the benefit of using the A2 rather than the A major is that it takes away a little bit of that edge from the happy sappy 3rd, which is the C sharp fretted on the B string in this case. So it just gives you a nice sort of round open sound. Our number 5 chord in the key of A is E. It's a nice, easy chord. It's open sounding, it's full because it uses all 6 strings. And as the second most important and likely second most common chord in the key of A, it's nice to have a powerful chord there. It's really easy to switch from the E to the E suspended by putting down your pinky finger. It's very common to switch between those 2 in the key of A. It's also quite easy to switch from the E back to that A2 that we mentioned. It's very smooth to do so. And one last trick is that the E suspended you can also do just by fretting your index finger the same way that we did with the A. So there really is a lot of flexibility with this chord. The number 4 chord in the key of A is D. Now we mentioned in the video on the key of D that this chord is a little bit wimpy. When you're playing it in its root position, in its purest form, you're only playing the top 4 strings, so it's not very powerful. Now, that's kind of a big deal when you're playing in the key of D, where that D chord is supposed to be your number 1 and your home chord, kind of providing shape for the whole song. But in the key of A, it's providing a different function, so it really doesn't matter. Now, an alternate version of this chord, the D2, will be quite useful when you combine it with the A2 and the E in maintaining an open sound. So all you do is you lift up your top finger and you have just the open E string. The number 6 chord in the key of A is F sharp minor. And this is where we start getting into a bit of trouble because F sharp minor is one of those dreaded bar chords. So beginning guitar players will often throw their hands up and run away in tears or go find a capo and play in the key of G. This being the 5th video in this series on guitar keys, it's almost comical now how much effort I have to put into getting a decent sound out of these bar chords, and I don't know if I can with this one. Oh, that wasn't terrible. Anyway, if you take a song like Blessed Be Your Name, which is often done in A, if you can imagine 1/4 of the song trying to go back to this chord, it can get quite frustrating, especially if your fingers aren't as strong as that old man on your street that likes to impress you with the strength of his handshake. Yeah, so I generally try to avoid it. And as I mentioned in the video on the key of E, there's a couple close cousins that you can use. And the one that I use most often is F sharp minor 7, add 4. And it just provides a nice open sound, the top 2 strings ringing openly. And this will combine nicely with the other variations of the chords we already looked at. And last, and most definitely least, the number 2 chord in the key of A is B minor. And again, this is one of those dreaded bar chords. Thankfully, it's easier to play than the F sharp minor. But just in the spirit of keeping with that nice open sound that we talked about, there is an alternate version of this. This is a B minor add 4 that allows you to keep the top 2 strings open, which is in common with most of the other chords in this key. So those are the primary chords in the key of A, and now it's time to put it all together. So what I want to do is go through chord progressions in a couple of well-known songs to show you what they sound like in the key of A, and then do them again in the key of G with the capo on to show you how the chord shape can really influence the sound. All right, let's start with the key of A. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. And the same thing in the key of G. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. And you could try it in the key of G. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the glorious name. So you can see there's very different qualities between the key shapes of A and G. And many people that I know that play guitar would rather do this song capoed like this in the key of G. But I think it really loses a little bit of that power, and when you're using the alternate open chords in the key of A, you do get a little bit of dissonance, and it just gives it a bit of edge. Thanks so much for tuning into this video on playing guitar in the key of A. I think A is a totally underrated key that really has a lot of potential that gets overlooked. If you're willing to use some of those open chord variations, you can transform what can be a difficult and clunky key into a smooth sounding, open, and kind of edgy key to play in. Now this is the last video in this guitar series. In the future, I do hope to make individual videos on topics like strumming patterns, how to incorporate guitar into building song arrangements. But over the next little while, I want to focus on something that's a real passion of mine, and that is bridging the gap between traditional hymns and contemporary worship songs. We'll talk about some of the important differences between how they're constructed and ways that you can bring traditional hymns into a contemporary context through different arrangement techniques. These NoPro worship videos are brought to you by my patrons on Patreon. Without them, this series would not be possible. If you're interested in supporting this ministry, you can visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/DavidWesley. And I will see you next Friday.